All right, guys, welcome back to another episode of Crossing Swords. As always, I'm Andrew.
And I'm here to ask some deep questions. Well, not that deep, but topical questions, relevant questions. And political questions.
Yeah, I think that's the idea for today. We wanted to talk about current events, how we're feeling, what we think about what's going on.
How are you feeling?
Pessimistic, I guess. Apathetic, perhaps, as well.
Best you can hope for in Brexit, really.
Yeah, I mean, it's a number of things, isn't it? It's not just Brexit, it's the government we have, the lack of capability to affect any real change, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, we'll get onto that, right? I figure.
Yeah. I mean, in the last week, we've had the party conferences for Labour and the Conservatives. I only really looked into those. I wasn't particularly interested in looking into any others.
Haven't had them yet. Most of the others.
Well, there you go. Then that's probably why I didn't see anything. Not to say that I potentially wouldn't watch them.
No, but there are obviously these are kind of taken over as the tertiary parties. I think the Green Party is probably becoming the new third party, but it seems
to be headed
Labour
that way. But they're still not significant enough, I would say.
It's still a red and blue split.
Yeah, and to be honest with you, I don't know if at the moment, if we had a general election, whether it would change much.
Well, this is what I asked you. So I sort of, one of the things that I wanted to say to you was, you know, we can get into it now if you want, but I'll get into it more. But do you think Labour can win a general election?
To be honest, because of how much ground they've got to win back and how unprecedented that big a swing is. I mean, before it hadn't happened since pre-war, I'm thinking, before Boris Johnson's government did it. And I don't think Keir Starmer's popularity has risen enough at the moment to feel confident that they would win.
Well, I think there's one big problem in the Labour Party, but we will come on to that at some point, I'm sure. Let me just bring out my...
Please do.
Just a few talking points, not so much notes. Please don't think I've prepared anything. One of the things I did quite like was during the Labour conference, or possibly before it, they were discussing Starmer's options as a leader, as a prime minister and whatever, and obviously the fact that he was a lawyer,
yeah,
for want of a better term, for the long time.
I mean, he was the head of
he was chief prosecutor. It's an impressive lawyer. He's a fancy lawyer.
Sorry, continue.
One of the things that was a sort of Starmer opposer said during a news channel, a news item, was they said, you know, how would you describe Keir Starmer? And I thought it was so telling. They said he's honest, you know, he's hardworking, but he's not a politician.
Well,
and you're like, well, there you go, yeah.
That is the worry. The problem is when you've got someone in opposition, and especially in power as Boris is, and there's a lot of things I don't like about Boris, but I can give him credit on quite a few other things. That I think he's far more intelligent than he leads on. He's incredibly charismatic. People like him, and he is.
God knows how. I really don't know how. And he has
somehow managed, with everything that's gone against him, to garner this persona that he's fighting for the people, that he's one of the people, and that ultimately he's looking out for everyone and not just the elite, when his actions point to the complete opposite.
Well, I know. Well, I want to mention this, that during an interview during the conference, and you must have seen, or you must have, but you may well have seen the clip where he says, it's essentially, and I am not paraphrasing what he says it, but he said, you know, don't forget about cancer rates, which are up. Yeah. Obviously, because of the backlog of the NHS, but cancer rates are up. Forget about average lifespan, which is down for the first time in a long time. He said, forget about cancer rate, forget about lifespan. He said, you know, we've delivered in the one place that counts. He said, wages are up. However, the thing is, and that's great, wages are up, but the rate of living and the new national insurance tax, which they promised wouldn't come, by the way, have essentially meant that relative to cost of living, wages are down.
I watched something yesterday, and I wish I could remember what the two words were, but there's a difference. It was nominal and something else, and basically what it means is what you were explaining.
Yeah, nominally it's up.
Yeah,
the number is up,
But in terms of what your outgoings are, they've also increased higher than the level of what
they're
your
higher
increase
than
is.
the wages haven't matched the rate of inflation.
No, they haven't.
And so basically, in real terms,
people are earning less.
Wages are down.
Yeah.
So your big claim is just a load of crock shit.
Yeah, but the thing is, it doesn't even matter, because even when he did the Andrew Marr show, which quite frankly is a bit of a sham of a show in terms of holding people to, or
but Marr did a decent job.
But he did, I mean, I'd give him credit. I saw a couple of clips and he did try to call Boris out on lying about that very issue.
Yeah, he said the wages are up, and he said, well, that's a lie. Because he just said,
you're blustering now.
He said that's a lie. And he said, no, it's not. He said, yeah, but compared to when you look at the rate of living and when you look at the tax increase that your government has imposed, despite saying you weren't going to, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. But the thing is, the problem is we sit here and we talk about Boris in these podcasts, and to a degree it feels pointless, just in the sense of it hasn't changed anything. Like, he lies, he does whatever he wants.
I know, I saw a great clip.
He has a huge majority in Parliament, which means pretty much on top of the extraordinary powers that they have been given for the coronavirus, which I believe is being pulled back. But my point is that despite all of it, it seems the general opinion is that he's a more realistic option than Keir Starmer.
Well, yeah, didn't someone phone into a radio station recently, and I'm probably not the only one, and they said the reason I voted Tory is because there's no one else. And you're like, well, literally anyone else. I mean, no word of a lie. Literally anyone else right now. Because it's the thing, like, in the past, I'm not a Tory voter.
No.
And I don't agree with generally the Tory policies and the Tory way of life.
Yeah.
But in previous years, I would never have necessarily judged that much about someone being a Tory voter. It would have been a difference I can get past. Because you just go, well, we all vote different ways. We all have different opinions on life. What these guys are doing under Boris's government and Boris's cabinet are so dangerous to this country. And politicians, they've always been dishonest and they've always stretched the truth and trying to... But the flat-out lies that they tell...
all-time high now.
And, these are the masters of to quote a common expression, these are the absolute masters of pissing in your face and telling it's raining. The fact that they are so dangerous, again and again and again... if someone turns around now and says they vote Tory for this Tory government, since Boris has been leader, I can't get past that. I will say it.
The thing is, I can understand what you're saying. The only problem I have is I watched...
because I want to know why.
I watched Owen Jones at he went to the Tory party conference to try and interview some of the MPs and cabinet members, but he also interviewed some of the Tory supporters, members. And most of them... I mean, they appeared, I don't want to be disparaging, they appeared middle class, clearly had money, were dressed very well, and in general, what they believed in, or what they said they believed in, was a right to self-determination. They believe in the power of the individual, and I know that's the overall Conservative belief that people should work for what they get right. And in some ways, I don't disagree with that. And then when Owen would push them on, well, then why are you supporting a government that's just cut universal credit? And then they're going, with these people, they need to manage their finances, and there's an ignorance there. But when they're confronted with it, all of them went, well, yeah, then wages should go up, really, shouldn't they?
Interesting. But I said the thing is the whole, and I think that's a great way to describe the kind of the Tory mentality, the voting of the Tory mentality is, the self-individual thing. And I've worked for what I've got. But the difference is, I just said the difference is, I think, is that's really easy when you've got a platform to start from. But when you're at the bottom and you don't already have that leg up,
I absolutely,
there's a huge difference. If mum and dad are going to give you, several £1,000s, and they're going to give you, the ability to get on the property ladder and all this stuff and that, that's great. But you're saying, I work for this.
Yeah.
But you didn't. You worked for it from a certain point, but you had a much better starting point than someone down below who you say, well, I got here, you can get them. It's like, no, because they didn't have the same starting point. You didn't start the race. It's like a race, and you're saying, well, we're all running the same race, so really, it's fine. We'll get as far as we get running this race. And it's like, yeah, but you started a lot further into the race than this person did.
And there is definitely a number of people. And the thing is, as you know, I do actually agree with you. I'm not...
No, you're just playing the...
devil's advocate a little bit, but also just from what I saw of these people. But in terms of... what was it you were just...
I was talking about... I was doing a race analogy. I was saying that these people have started on
so
higher...
I think there's definitely a number of people who fit into that, like a large majority of their supporters. But there's also people who do, like there was quite a few immigrants that were now British citizens but Tory members that said, you know, we came over here with nothing, we worked hard, just, you know, we started off with even less than the people born here that were on benefits, and we've managed to make our lives for ourselves. And I think that's fantastic, and I think all people should aspire to that, but that's not everyone's reality. There's, you know, that family might have had a degree of luck and become successful, whereas, you know...
And also, there are a lot of Tory voters who don't have that leg up, and they are sort of more working class people, but their mentality is, and I know this is really common among people in the world, and I hate it so much, I genuinely despise it as a worldview, it's almost like... that's the way things are, that's the way they should be. And you're like, yeah, but things are shit for you. And they're like, yeah, but why should it be easier? I don't want to have to struggle and then give someone an easier life.
The people
100%. They're looking you know, think about the common argument that you and I have heard for years. And people say, you know, people come to sitting on benefits and whatever, having it easy. And it's like, and you know, the thing is, it's like, I worked hard. Why shouldn't, and it's like, well, first of all, there's no saying they're not. But also, it's like, well, you know, surely if it was if it was like your kids, if it was my kids, whatever struggles I've had in my life, I don't want them to have the struggles. I don't want them to have the same barriers to overcome that I did. I want things to be easier and fairer for them.
I mean, not to go off on a tangent, but it sort of rolls into something I actually, funnily enough, was talking about with my partner yesterday, because we were talking about, obviously, we were sort of not long-term planning, we were just talking about the future. And we were talking about, you know, how expensive it is living in this country, especially in London. My partner works full-time. I've just got a new full-time job. And we were like, even with our joint salaries, we will be able to afford to get our own place together renting, but we won't be able to afford to have a kid.
Yeah.
And then we said, like, the ridiculousness of the situation, that we would be better off if I got my partner pregnant, leaving her and her getting supported by the state. And we'd be better off financially. And it's...
Yeah, and that's the problem. That's the thing. That's the biggest thing that I want from my political views.
Most people don't want to use the benefit system. It's an embarrassing experience. It does feel degrading.
No, it's never. It's degrading. I mean, PIP, which is the new Tory reform. Not even Johnson. This is going back to Cameron, and that it is fucking disgraceful.
Oh, I completely agree.
You know, ringing people with who have double amputees and being like, well, can you prove you can't walk? And it's like, what the fuck, you think I grew my legs back?
And people with cerebral palsy being asked repeatedly to prove
well, that's been a video that's been in the news recently, for sure, been doing the rounds.
Yeah, I mean, we discussed it earlier in the week, and I mean, in fairness to Jacob Rees-Mogg, and I do say that very lightly, I felt he handled it reasonably
as well as one can.
Yeah.
Well, I think as well the PIP thing, I know a number of, and like literally I kind of like joined in on a discussion and debate where it was like a group of people that were all shared experiences, who all knew someone or were someone who suffer hugely from like anxiety, face-to-face anxiety, going out, doing stuff like that.
Yeah.
And the government have all, and PIP have said, well, you need to come and have a face-to-face assessment. And then like, but it's literally in the notes. It's in the medical note. The whole reason that I'm being referred to for this by the medical practitioners is because I can't do that. That's why I can't work. That's why I can't. Well, I can. There are still some jobs, but that's why I need to claim this money.
Yeah.
And they're like, you need to come in and do it. And it's like, but do you not see the fucking idiocy of it?
Well, that's the thing. And would that then get used against them if they do turn up to the meeting? Well, it says in your notes that you can't do face-to-face interaction, but
absolutely it would. But you've made it here, so I think you can make it anywhere.
Yeah.
No, absolutely it would. But sorry.
But the thing is, and that's because there is a national attitude and belief, as we just said, that people believe there are more people dodging the benefit system than genuinely needing in it. And I don't think that is the case. Yeah,
and so just to finish my point that I wanted to make with that, a large part of my political point, and obviously I have more sort of subtle and nuanced and subheadings of sort of sub-points that I believe in, policies that I strongly feel in favour for and against. But I believe strongly that in what would be considered a civilized world, in a first world country, which we're not even, but even in a second world country, that anyone, and never mind coupling up, that anyone working full time should be able to afford to live. They should be able to afford a place, a roof over their head. They should be able to afford food. They should be able to afford heating and electricity. They shouldn't have to choose between these things. They shouldn't have to be picking up second jobs and second hustles to achieve those things. That's the bare minimum. Anyone working any job, I don't care how low skilled it is or whatever you want to phrase it, if you are working full-time hours, if you are working 35 plus hours a week, you should be able to afford to live.
See, what's funny about what you just said was you said these low-skilled workers. Well, during the pandemic, we were suddenly key workers. We were the most important people, and then suddenly now
you're back to being low-skilled workers. And let me put this back on you, because Boris Johnson spoke about in his speech. He spoke about the whole levelling up program.
Yeah,
and he spoke about we're going to move to high wages, high skilled jobs. So we're going to promote. We're going to try and push people into higher skilled jobs. It's like, okay, but that still doesn't fix the problem. You've moved everyone up a scale, but then who's going to fill the ones at the bottom?
Yeah.
Either the chain falls apart because there's no one propping it up, or you have to start acknowledging the thing, or we're just right back where we are, where the low skilled workers are getting no pay and they're not able to live.
But do you think the reason we don't take the correct action, because it is fairly obvious, isn't it? It's just pay people more money, and I know that means cost of living goes up as well, because obviously services have to charge more to afford the wages. But even if you introduce something like universal basic income, would make a massive difference. If everybody was entitled to a small amount of money every month
top up,
that topped up their income, it would add so much freedom to everyone's lives. People would be more productive because they wouldn't be panicking about money all the time.
I know, and do you know what the really obvious thing about where to get that money from? And I do sound like a proper liberal lefty snowflake on this one.
Taxing big corporations.
Taxing the rich. Do you know that I was reading a report that says an economist, a mathematician, has done a report recently. Mostly, I think, just because, or they did it a while back, but they're promoting it because of the Pandora Papers that have come out in the last week or so. And they were talking about the number of billionaires that exist in the UK, not the world, that are registered in the UK. And each one of them could give every single person who's living below the poverty line in the UK £30,000, and they would still be billionaires. They would still not drop below the billionaire state. They'd still have even if they, and bear in mind, think about this, even if you drop below that, you've still got £999 million. But if
you're not destitute.
If they gave £30,000 to every single person living below the poverty line, they'd still be billionaires. So you're talking about where's there's money for it? Fucking there. That's where the money for it. And I got so angry watching Boris Johnson's speech at one point. I didn't watch it, but I was sort of reading the report, because at one point he said, and what do they want to do? They want to tax the rich until the pips squeak. And it's like, yes, yes, absolutely, we should be fucking taxing the rich. People have been getting poorer. People have been losing their homes. People have been going hungry. There have been more families having to choose between feeding their kids and putting the heating bill on. All the meanwhile, during the pandemic, the Tories have handed out billions of pounds, not millions of pounds, billions of pounds to their friends.
No, I know. And the funny thing is,
so the money's there.
Even the working classes join in on not wanting the status quo to change because of aspiration. They believe that there's a chance that they might be a higher class or upper working class or middle class one day. So they want to be able to protect themselves if they get there. But if we somehow find a way in this country of turning working class people in on themselves.
There's a genius thing that working class people, the mentality that seems to be working, and it's why the right are in power more often than not. And it's amazing, when we grew up, we grew up with a Labour government, so I just thought that was the norm.
Yeah.
I never realised until a bit, and then the Tories came in, and I was like, cool, sometimes it's Labour, sometimes it's the Tories, and I never realised that actually for the most of the part, it's Tories.
Labour was taken down by a left movement, really, because the world became more woke and our behaviour in foreign affairs became more intolerable to ourselves above anyone else. Yeah. So it meant that someone who is borderline a war criminal, in my opinion, but also was an effective Prime Minister, was the last Labour government we had. And to be honest, there's not been anyone since.
Yeah, I mean, not to remember, but while we're talking about wages and living, remember that Blair's government was the one to introduce a minimum wage in this country.
Yeah.
But I can't remember what I was saying. Oh, no, there's this mentality among working class people, is that as long as I'm not the bottom of the pile, I'm okay. And the worry is, and here's where it's hard to get around, and the mentality will never really change. It's really difficult to switch this. It's like, yeah, but what if the bottom was actually livable? What if the bottom wasn't so bad? Rather than being in this horrible, dingy, bottom of the barrel, mould everywhere kind of thing, what if the bottom was actually just, a middle-class deck on the cruise liner or whatever analogy you're using? It's like, what if the bottom, and then you're the bottom, along with loads of other people, but actually you have a better quality of life than you did before when you were above someone else? Because the rate of everyone's gone up. And it's that switch that's just never going to happen. So like, I don't want to be the bottom.
It's that fundamental
and right now I'm not the bottom. And they'd rather be worse off than be the bottom.
Well, that's the thing, because people think by giving everyone, as I've said loads of times,
by
giving more to others, you end up with
you.
less yourself. And that's in all things, whether it's monetarily, race equality, sex equality.
And money, in terms of money, like I said, you just need to look at the pandemic. Talking about there's no money for this, there's no money for that. There was billions got given out for billions of pounds got spent on PPE.
Give our nurses a proper pay rise.
Billions got spent on PPE that wasn't usable
to companies that had never worked in that field, not months before.
So there's money. The money's there. Definitely.
Think another part of the problem for me,
and the rich got richer. The money's there.
I can remember pretty much my entire life, the general narrative in the media has been the problem in this country is immigration. Yeah. And that led to a success in Brexit. And it still seems to work in terms of whipping people into a frenzy that immigration is still the problem in this country, to the degree that we didn't want to bring in immigrant HGV drivers.
For the recent fuel crisis.
Yeah, and that Boris couldn't do it because we were taking back control of our borders, and yet he would have had to have welcomed.
Well, and then he did offer it.
Yeah, but he's not going to offer more out, is he?
No. But the thing is, he said we'll take 300, and most of them, bear in mind, last Christmas.
Yeah.
Because of Brexit and the queues in Kent, last Christmas there were hundreds of lorries on a runway in Kent.
I remember that. Yeah.
So it's like, do you really think they're going to rush back to do that again for a country that doesn't appreciate them or want them, that will kick them out the second they're done? No. And also, he offered 300 people that opportunity. 27 took him up.
And I think the other side
and that's surprisingly high
that lambasts that issue is, in a sense, by being part of the EU and immigration being such a natural flow, especially being at the time one of the most economically powerful countries in the world, and we have an NHS, we were a place people wanted to come. And so in a sense, gelling together and becoming, I'm trying to think, I can't remember the right word, but when people come together and you force it upon them, I think people feel invaded, they feel, and it just compounds on that issue of the media constantly pushing that narrative.
I'll tell you what's become the new, immigration will always be top, but I'll tell you what, in the wake of Brexit, because now we can't really blame immigration, we still do a little bit, and Priti Patel, obviously, to sending back the boats and whatever else, this ridiculous narrative. Also, breaking international law, by the way, there is an international law that the UK are signed up to that says that even if an alien or a migrant enters a country illegally, if they declare themselves to the authorities,
they can't be.
You have to
process them, and
you have to review their migrant status. Like, obviously, this government will undoubtedly say no.
But they still have to go through it.
And by just turning them away, you are literally breaking international law. And this is the thing Boris talking about. We're the
well, this is the problem, because I don't think that matters to Boris.
No, nothing matters to Boris.
We have brazenly gone back on promises we made during the Brexit negotiations. We're trying to change the deal now, post agreeing it, and now there's rumours
the oven-ready deal that was all ready to go.
Yeah. And now the French are apparently leaning on us to drop our changes over the fuel crisis and the gas crisis and
you look at the things like crisis. The Tories in the latest manifesto promised to pledge to greener living and whatever. How did they do that? By scrapping the emissions policy out of our deal with Australia.
Yep.
So we're out of the EU. We get a new trade deal with Australia. Australia say, yeah, we're not signing up to that with the green deals in place. And we went, okay, because you hold all the cards.
It's just going to be more of the same, because now that we've left the EU, everything has to be up for grabs.
Yeah.
So the NHS being privatised, but it's just a matter of time. It's already happening anyway.
It is already happening.
So it's going to happen.
And do you know what's really
point.
scary about it? Is it's the way it's being done is underfund it. Well, it's it's underfund it so that
and
it
make
fails.
People angry at it.
So that when you introduce a change, people are willing to pay for it. Not willing. They'll never stop and go, hang on, this was free and this should be free. They'll go, yeah, but at least it works now.
Yeah.
And but it doesn't work. That's sort of and if they'd have funded it properly, it would have worked anyway. I'm getting sidetracked. Because the other thing what I was saying is immigration but the newest thing, the flash thing that you can put in the papers and gets people speaking up is the woke culture. The cancel culture, the woke culture. And it's like woke is thrown around as an insult by the right. And you're like, well, but if you examine it, what does woke mean? It means
being less offensive.
Alert. It means turned on. It means giving a shit. Respecting other people and being
aware of what's
happening and your impact.
Yeah, how you affect and interact with the sort of the social consciousness at the time. And the thing is that it's constantly flowing, and I think that's why. And this is where the left have gone wrong, to sort of go off on a tangent a little bit. And as you said, with the woke culture, they have gone over the top at times. And I think there has to be more understanding that, human beings are human beings. And we seem to pick and choose when it's okay. Like, I'm a huge fan of James Gunn. He lost his job as Guardians and then obviously has since got it back. But over things he said years ago. And I'm not saying...
And has since apologised.
Absolutely. But it's happening over and over again. And for some people, it destroys their careers and it's the end. But others, they're lucky enough to come back. But I think it's made the left so unappealing to the general public that they have nowhere else to go other than to the Conservatives.
Or nowhere.
Or to the right. Or people just become apathetic and don't engage.
One thing I took away from the conference as well, if I could just go,
Absolutely.
is, Nadine Dorries, the culture secretary.
Is this the one that went on as a celebrity?
Yeah. But she was calling out the BBC for nepotism, for saying, most people work there because mummy and daddy work there.
Right.
And just to give you a bit of, just to give you a level of hypocrisy that
comes as... her dad was a politician.
No, comes as standard with the Tory party and with the Tory ministers in this government. She hired her two daughters for a total of 80 grand a year.
What, taxpayer funded?
Yeah, taxpayer funded.
Obviously, yeah. But as I go at the BBC for nepotism.
Even if it's not taxpayer funded, you can't call out somewhere and go, oh, my mummy and daddy work there. It's like you literally gave your kids jobs, high paying jobs.
Yeah.
Like, what the fuck are you talking about, bro?
Yeah, they're paid the same as an MP. Near enough.
Oh, and don't get me started on some of there's a Tory MP has come out this week. I don't know his name. Talking about how hard it is to live on 82 grand a year. And it's like, please give me that chance to suffer like that. If it's so
I'd
hard,
like a go at it. Yeah.
I'll fall on that sword for you. I'll take it. You will swap salaries.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because just to be clear, like,
no,
not
but
to give my salary
Boris
away.
Has pleaded
but
poverty.
Not to give my salary away, but if I worked 3 years solid, saved up every single penny, didn't touch it, I still wouldn't have as much as they earn in a year. 4 years, just about. But once you add on expensive, no.
No, but it's mad.
Yeah, and also...
And even Boris has pleaded poverty, hasn't he? He said he can't afford to live on the Prime Minister's
it's 150 grand a year, and it's like, it's so tough, and it's like, you can fuck off.
If I'm being honest, though, personally, and this isn't anything for Boris, it's just for any Prime Minister, I don't think that's necessarily a huge sum of money to be paid to be the leader of the country.
No, but what it is...
I wouldn't be angry if the Prime Minister earned $1 million a year, for example.
I'll tell you what I want to impose.
Considering heads of banks are on silly money, I think the leader of our country should be...
I mean, this would never go through Parliament because they'd never vote for it. You'd never get all the enough MPs to vote for it. But if I was Prime Minister, I'll tell you what I'd table a bill that said MPs earn minimum wage. And if you can't live on that, well, then you need to reassess minimum wage.
Yeah. I mean, the problem is, though, obviously that's not going to happen.
No, it's never going to.
By having it being just enough money that it's worth a certain level of person attaining, they're not going to ever let themselves be at the same level of those of us, the plebs.
No, not like that's what it says. You're never going to get them all to vote for it. But
No.
for me, it'd be like you should be in the job, and also it would deter all the ones that want to be. You should be in the job because you genuinely want to make a difference. You're not there to make money. The money that you make is just enough to get by. You can live on it comfortably. Like that's the aim, is that you live relatively comfortably. But none of this like second homes, lots of fucking private jet holidays, all that shit.
That was something I wanted to talk to you about. Actually, was the situation in this country. I mean, I know people personally who do it, who stockpile homes.
Yeah.
Who live off of the rent of multiple.
Dirty, hate it.
Yeah, I find it really difficult.
Because they're the ones that talk about, the people at the bottom of society being lazy and not wanting to do jobs and, not willing to work hard enough. It's like, but you literally make money by sitting on your ass.
Yeah,
and taxing other
things like the person
hard-working people.
I know who's in that situation. They and their partner both had very successful careers, earn a lot of money, and that's how they were able to afford to buy the amount of properties that they had. But obviously, it's one of those where they keep getting, like, the mortgages are being paid off by the rent of the property. So that gives a suggestion of how much money they had that they could
afford that.
But so in their case, I still find I'm very uncomfortable with that.
You can still like them as people,
yeah,
but that actual practice I don't like.
I don't know. I think it's wrong, and it's why, like, my mum started watching at home Slum Landlords and Nightmare Tenants.
Yeah.
And one of the constant things you get are these people that are living, like, very close to the edge, that own multiple properties that are completely ruined because they get a shitty tenant. And now I do feel sorry to them to a degree, but then part of me's like, well, that's your own fault for overreaching. You should have been happy the fact you owned one home, let alone...
Yeah, I face the fact that realistically, there is a good chance that I will never own a home.
No, the only chance I will have will be when my mum passes away.
Yeah, but that's just, I mean, like, there's a good chance. You own multiple homes. Listen, I work full time. I'm not right at the bottom of the barrel. Don't need to claim any benefits to top up my salary, and yet I will never own a home.
No.
Tell you how unattainable, and that's the thing that we had another Tory MP recently saying that it's doable, and you should not doable, but you should try and work hard towards it. Given that it's all the way out there, it should be motivation for you to really work towards it. It's like, no, or you could move the line a bit closer, because it's not something that I want. It's not a luxury. That's the thing. It's being sold. No. Home ownership now is being sold as a luxury. Yeah. And it's not. We need to remember that it's a basic necessity.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you. I think it's both. I do think people have to be more sensible and work harder towards things, but that's difficult.
That'll only take you so far.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So the line needs to be moved closer, but I think it's made even harder when you live in a society where we're constantly bombarded with buy me, do this, and it's, and it ends up leading people to spend far more money than they should.
But potentially, I just think it's, when you look at the rate of owning a home, paying mortgage, and the rate of earning the salaries, the salaries have they've gone up again. Like Boris, like going back to the Boris thing, nominally they've gone up, but not nearly at the same rate as the houses.
No.
So whereas before you could pay off a mortgage in X many years, paying this amount, well now you have to pay double that percentage of your salary, and you have to wait a little bit longer to pay it off, kind of thing. And that's even if you can get it.
I don't know how you bridge the gap, and I don't know, if I'm being honest, if we ever will. Like I said, I'm not even confident that we'll get a change in party in charge of the country when the next election rolls around. And part of me wonders whether the problem is, and I think I mentioned it to you before, I wonder whether the fact that Keir Starmer is in fact Sir Keir Starmer goes against him.
Possibly. There's a couple of things I want to ask you before I kind of move on to Labour, if you don't mind, not to dictate the flow of it. I think just to this one, and this isn't I don't want to take this moment as an I told you so, but for anyone who knows me will remember all the way back in 2015-16, I said if Brexit is successful, they'll gun for the Human Rights Act. And this week, Dominic Raab announced that they want to scrap the Human Rights Act.
Of course they do.
Which I think is just the most despicable, deplorable thing.
Well, what it means is things for the average, everyday worker like me and yourself, our lives could get a hell of a lot worse.
everyone right now, we have
what it
a
means
basic leg to stand on,
like
legally.
Things as little and as big. I mean, that they're small in the grand scale, but for the individual, it's big. We're currently protected by rules like I'm entitled to 11 hours between shifts legally. But by scrapping the Human Rights Act and things like that and labour laws, which we now have the power to do now we're out of the EU, all those sort of things go out the window. Any flexibility we had left in working life, which was very little to begin with.
Not just working life, there's certain things that the Human Rights Act say that, you know, politically
human
and
decency towards the rest of the world.
you know, you shouldn't be subjected to. So whether that's literally, I mean, I cannot express myself, just as a basic human being, whether you are, you know, they could. I mean, I know it sounds dramatic, but they could torture you.
Yeah.
And there's nothing saying, you know, they say, well, we needed the information that we thought we had. They didn't have it, but we needed it. You know, they can kick people out of their homes and put them on the which I know they do anyway. But you know, there's no. There are fewer steps to do that. There are fewer barriers to overcome.
What do you think the actual benefit to the Conservatives doing that is, though? What is it they want to do that they can't currently do?
Well, the Human Rights Act allows me and you some basic rights that mean that if they're taken away, they can work us harder, and they can try and pump more money into their own pockets or get more out of us. They can get more out of us by giving us less.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they're like, oh, we've got to make sure they've got this and we've got to make sure that it's none of that.
No.
Like running sweatshops. I mean, honestly, it's just...
But
it's not
you'd
good.
think that on its own would be a public outrage, wouldn't you?
Well, yeah.
But
this Tory government have so got people wrapped up that they are pissing in our face and telling us it's raining. They're like, you know, we're getting rid of the Human Rights Act, and that's a good thing. It's like, no! The EU was literally founded because of one of the worst violations of human rights in history. And
we want to open the doors back up to that sort of...
Yeah.
Do you think that's because, as a country, we're more right-leaning than we've
We're
ever
very
been?
right-leaning, and also we, you know, Boris spoke in his speech about, you know, they wanted to call Churchill a racist and rewrite history and whatever. It's like he was a racist. I mean, he literally spoke about white supremacy.
Yeah.
So we're not changing history; we're just bringing it to light. And I think that's one of the things that I think goes against this is that we've spoken about it before. We are hugely in denial in this country about our own history. And about the negative things that we've done and do.
I don't know whether if it's us as a public who don't want to.
No, it's not us.
No. But I think it's, and I hate using the words like establishment, but the establishment don't want you going back and looking at what is supposed to be a hero of all time, Winston Churchill, the man who saved us against Hitler. If you start scratching beneath the surface and going, well, wait a second, he committed genocide of millions of people in India and... He's sent thousands of soldiers to their death.
We all want to talk about how the fact that we will. Oh, sorry.
If we start doing that, we're going to then start scratching beneath the surface because, by comparison to Winston Churchill and the image they portray, our current politicians aren't fit to wipe his boots. So if we start scratching beneath that surface, we're going to start.
Well, also, I think. I just completely lost my train of thought. We're saying
Winston Churchill.
You know, we want to go. Well, we were one of the early. You know, we were one of the earlier countries to promote the women's vote and the women's rights, and we were one of the we were one of the first to have a kind of integrated black and white country before the Americans. And it's like, okay, but let's look at all the other shit that we did that was not good. Let's look at all the other areas where we were quite far behind the grade and the scale. And again, like you said, they don't want us opening up those. They don't want us opening up that kind of worms.
No, they don't want us opening up old wounds.
But what it means is we have such a warped view of ourselves as Britain that, you know, we're like, we don't worry about the Human Rights Act and stuff like that. Because we're like, well, we're so great, you know, like, well, we're not, you know, we're the world leaders.
Well, the thing is, if you don't understand your past, you can't understand how you're going forward. And it's one of the reasons why I actually have a lot of respect for Germany as a nation. And I think I might have said it before on the pod, because they educate their children of every generation about what happened during the Holocaust, because they want to ensure that sort of travesty never happens again. and it's about because obviously none of the people alive now are responsible for anything.
Can I just ask you this though, because this was in the news?
Yeah.
Pad a little.
Well, what I was saying about Germany is that, there's no. I don't want to say there's no shame to it, because obviously there is, but
they have to embrace it.
Yeah,
they embrace it.
They do. And I think for me that means I'm far more forgiving of them as a nation than others.
But yeah, me saying this though, there was in the news this week a woman who is, I think, 100 or so, maybe 90.
Yeah.
I mean, you can do the maths and work it out. I just can't be asked. But so she was like 17 at the time during the at a point in the Second World War.
Yeah.
And she was working as a secretary in a camp, in an internment camp, in a Jewish camp.
Yeah.
And this week she's been put on trial. But because she was 17 at the time, she's a 93-year-old on trial in a juvenile court. And even better, she ran away. She did a runner. On the way to the trial, she decided to get in a taxi and go somewhere else, and she fucked off.
I'm not sure how I feel about it, to be honest.
No, it's the idea of a 93-year-old in a juvenile court that kind of was the one that caught my attention.
I don't know whether it's morally the right thing to do or not. Was this in a German court?
Yeah.
It's hard because it's hard to say that if you weren't in Nazi Germany at the time as a normal German citizen, that you wouldn't. It's hard to know where you would draw the line about what you did or didn't do. And it's hard to condemn someone.
Yeah, well, there's
for doing morally the wrong thing, but what most people would do.
Recently, I watched Tenet, and there's a kind of bit in the Tenet.
I've not seen it.
And this is no spoiler. This happens really early on, by the way. He kind of
I have no idea what it's about.
He takes it. It's good. You should watch it. Honestly, it is. It's not as complicated as people make out. I don't know what the fuck people are watching, but it's actually really simple to follow. And halfway through, you're like, okay, I get it, and I get where it's going, and I get where it's been, and you really appreciate it.
But sorry, anyway, you watched it.
There's a bit where he sort of takes a cyanide capsule because he doesn't want to give away information and sell out his team. And then it turned out to be like a fake thing, and he wakes up and there's a superior of his kind of there talking. And he says, the thing is, he says, most of us like to think that in the situation we do the right thing.
Yeah.
He says, but the truth is, until the heat is on our back,
you have no idea.
No one knows how they react, but you will. And that was his line to him. It was a good line. It was a good bit. But you're right. We don't know how we would react. But just to get us back to the kind of the recent party conference and whatever, what did you make of Gove's joke?
What was his joke?
Michael Gove's, they saw me dancing.
Oh, no,
dance
that was
like
Boris's. That was Boris's.
No,
joke.
Gove. It was Gove. Dance like nobody's watching.
Okay. No, I didn't see his speech. I only saw Boris's.
He says, dance like nobody's watching. I've seen this written down once, and I'm trying it from memory. So apologies if I get it wrong. Dance like nobody's watching, except they were watching. From that photo of him in the nightclub, and he said, but there's enough about a man flailing around for an hour and a half, no real direction or grace or whatever, but enough about Keir Starmer's speech, he said. And
I think, to be honest, Boris's speech was pretty much all jokes.
It was what we thought it would be. Charisma, no substance.
Yeah.
And Keir's was the polar opposite. Lots of substance, no real charisma.
No, it was very dry. There was no real emotion in anything he was saying.
He is very almost robotic in that.
But I did like. The problem is he didn't deliver it well. But his joke about Boris Johnson's dad being a tool maker as well.
Yes, and my father was a tool maker in many ways. Boris's father was also a tool maker.
But it wasn't delivered with the. And that's the problem. I've had this sort of conversation with people recently where what you need on the left, or even just in Labour, whether it's centrist or left leaning, is someone equally as abhorrent as Boris, but just on our side. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I do kind of know what you mean.
Maybe abhorrent's the wrong word. I mean, like that has the same level of charisma on.
I said, and I want to sort of sum up Labour in a bit, but what do you make of Angela Rayner calling Boris Johnson scum?
It's funny, that was one of my questions to ask
you
as well, yeah. In terms of how it looks, she's not.
Tell me where she's wrong.
In terms of whether I agree with what she said or not, I obviously 100% agree. I don't know whether when you're trying to portray as an opposition that you are a more stable, reliable,
Yeah, I see
classy
hitting
act,
out seems a bit more.
It doesn't, and she's quite an
An
and I
outspoken
don't mean
person.
this in a bad way. She's quite a common sounding woman. She doesn't sound like a conservative. She's got a accent. I
just think she's well, not just the accent, but I think she's human. So when she gets passionate,
it just
she gets
automatically
passionate.
comes out, and I think that's something we need to see more of in politics in general.
It's why I like. It's why I like her. It's why I also like Jess Phillips.
It doesn't jive
for Labour.
It doesn't jive with what I think the Labour opposition is
Loving the use of the word jive.
Trying to put across.
Much like keeping the Michael
But
Gove
there's
thing.
a lot of rumours she might be, if Keir Starmer doesn't do well,
in
the
line.
next Labour leader, the first female Labour leader.
Well, I think, and I will sum up Labour now, I think that Corbyn was the Brexit of the Labour Party. Not necessarily anything Corbyn did himself, but his election was a clear motif by the membership, and bear in mind membership shot up just to elect him leader. It was a clear motivation from the membership to move the party to the left. However, a party on the left is never going to win.
Isn't widely accepted enough.
So what's happening is half the party want it to be really left wing, and partly in reaction to Brexit and what's happening. And the fact is, they need to be centrist to win. So you've got the ones who have got, and I don't want to because this sounds like I'm putting down the ones who are on the left and who are against the centre. But the fact is, the ones on the centre do kind of have their heads screwed on a bit more, and they're looking at it going, it's not about being this left Labour socialist. It's about winning. It's about getting Boris
it's about being
and
acceptable
Tories
to the people
out,
again.
and we have to be down the middle for that. And whereas the ones on the left, you've still got half the party you want to go. And I think it was much like Brexit. I think it's almost impossible to come back from that. Certainly for a while.
Yeah, and I think part of Labour's problem is I wouldn't be able to name half of the shadow cabinet.
I reckon I'd give it a good go.
I know Angela Rayner, Keir Starmer, obviously.
Pretty sure David Lammy's in there.
Diane Abbott.
As long as she's not doing the numbers.
And that's probably about as far as my Labour cabinet.
No, but the shadow cabinet, no one ever knows the shadow cabinet.
No, I don't. Maybe you're right. I don't know. I never really followed politics enough when Conservatives weren't in.
When you look at any
Parliament,
of the people, like literally
Ed
any
Miliband's
politician
on the shadow cabinet.
Yeah, Ed Miliband's
He's
on the shadow cabinet.
Their version of the Chancellor of the Exchequer.
I know he's Chancellor.
Yeah.
No,
I think it's Shadow Secretary for Commerce.
So I watched, but I watched recently. I don't know if you've watched it. It's the second. There's 2 parts out of this new Labour documentary on the BBC. So exploring Blair and Brown getting together and kind of reforming Labour and making them a winnable party.
Yeah,
and it's a really interesting thing. And do you know what it nearly inspired me to do? And I haven't done it yet, but I might. And this is a weird thing to do. It nearly made me want to join the Labour Party. And I'll tell you why. Because there's a weird motive for it, and it won't make sense to a lot of people, but some people I think will get it. The Labour Party does not represent me in any way, and I feel that's exactly why I need to join it, to make it represent me and to work from the inside and to try and do my bit to make Labour a winning party.
No, I can understand that, because
no, on the surface it sounds mental. It's like, are you a Labour fan? Do you blend like not at all?
No,
and that's why I want to join.
At the same time, they're the closest to what you believe in is out there that is real.
Well, I don't know. I think probably the Green that can win.
Yes. So my point is, you couldn't go to the Green Party and hope to have the same level of effect than if you went into the Labour Party, as things stand. I think if Labour have another disastrous election, I think people will start looking elsewhere. But no, I completely get why you're saying that, and I have myself thought about joining the Labour Party in the past, and then that was under Jeremy Corbyn.
Jeremy Corbyn.
And I mean, Boris even had a dig at him in his speech, didn't he? He said,
it's
I managed to see off cosmonaut Corbyn, and I thought, oh, you bastard. But looking back,
just want to say
there was no real way.
There are a lot of Corbyn fans out there who do listen to the pod as well, and I just want to say that, yes, you're right. He was done dirty by the media.
Oh, absolutely.
They clearly promoted against him.
And that's the thing. And his whole party worked against him, and that's part of the problem.
But I always said my biggest criticism was he never dealt with the anti-Semitism claim. He never dealt with it.
Well, it's funny you mention that. I actually read some articles about how when he became leader, he wanted to tackle it. But there's a part of the Labour Party, separate to the Labour Party, the people that investigate and deal with it within the Labour Party. And the head of the party has the right to change those people, but one, you have to have cause and things like that. And I think something in like it was nearly a 2-year period until he was able to effect change in that organisation and get his people in. But like they didn't go after anyone, and he kept he kept getting cited by this organisation for harassing them, and that he was.
But I just remember all the interviews and stuff when it was like, what about then? And he was just, oh, for God's sake, this again.
As soon as he got his own person in charge of that organisation, the amount of work that was being done to tackle it and the people being removed from the Labour Party and investigated went up dramatically.
Okay, well, I can support that.
But that's not what the media portrayed. So it's not.
But this is the clever thing about Boris. This is the clever thing about Boris, because there is a prime example. Jeremy Corbyn was, if that was the case, and I don't want to try and say it wasn't. If that was the case, Jeremy Corbyn's worked hard to make change and make effective change. It doesn't matter what you do. It matters what the public think you do.
And fundamentally, the other problem was he didn't have the support of the important people in his party. The vast majority of people didn't support him, and staffers were there was these leaked emails and texts from high-ranking staff members in the Labour Party that were supposed to be supporting Jeremy Corbyn to get elected. And there was periods where Corbyn's popularity were polling at a level where they thought they might actually get a hung parliament or Labour might actually win. And they were all beside themselves. They weren't happy. None of them wanted Corbyn to be Prime Minister. And that's part of the problem. It's unfair on him that they didn't get behind him or give him a chance. But he also never brought them round or
But when I said that's
anything.
the difference is it doesn't matter what you do, it matters what the public think you do. That's why Boris spends all his time on his image rather than on any actual substance.
Like if you compare the intro videos to the two conference parties, one for Boris, one for Keir Starmer's was very much it was quite a humble one, him going around meeting people.
His was very substance, substance, no charisma.
Boris's was all like, there was images of like, it was like, get Brexit done and break the gridlock. And when it came up to break the gridlock, there was a bulldozer going through a wall that said gridlock, and it was all punchy, and it was like, there was literally a scene of him with boxing gloves on, just punching thin air.
This is the thing what I want to say as well, because the Labour Party, one of the big things that works against them is because half of them are so far on the left and because half of them are not, people don't know what Labour stands for.
No, they don't, and I don't think Keir Starmer's done enough to
be clear on
even from his, like, he gave out things that he wants to work on, but it was more about what the Conservatives hadn't done and what he believed in as an individual rather than what he's actually going to try and affect in terms of change.
Very quickly, I wanted to ask you, and I'm sure if there's anything you wanted to ask, very quickly, what do you make of the Insulate Britain this week, blocking motorways and blocking roads and stuff? Because I say this, I think my opinion on it is this: it is very hard stories that you're reading, about people who wanted to see ill family, about all this stuff, and talks of ambulances being blocked and stuff, and it's hard. However, and I genuinely, I'm not supporting this, by the way. I'm just playing a kind of devil's advocate, I could not be clearer about this, just playing devil's advocate. It is making the front pages. And it is the whole point of that kind of thing, is to make an impact and to get people talking about it.
Yeah.
Also, they did attack, I think it was Farnham Airport, by the way, which has thousands of private flights a year. And all of the occupants of those private flights, by the way, could fit on one large commercial flight to Spain. So just to be clear, that was a good thing, because they make a huge... But what do you make of that, just quickly?
It's really hard. I agree with the sentiment. I agree with what they're trying to achieve. And as you said, it's desperately sad, some of the consequences of those demonstrations. But I think ultimately it brings more attention to it. It gets people talking about it. I don't think it ultimately is going to make any difference. But what I would say is I had a thought recently with what's been going on with the petrol pumps and the ridiculous queues and everything like that. There was emergency service vehicles, important carers trying to get around people that were unable to get fuel because of the irresponsibility of the general public to go mad. And then obviously the papers and the media play a part in that.
No, my favourite thing about that was, by the way,
how many people were inconvenienced or died because of that?
Yeah, no one knows. So my favourite thing about that, by the way, was the government saying, and rightfully so, by the way, because it wasn't a problem until everyone made it a problem. But saying there's no problem, you know, seriously, there's no problem, and then a week later bringing in the army. You're like, well, you don't bring in the army if there's no problem, just to be.
Well, no, but the problem is we created.
No, they
the
had to, but you're like, there's no problem.
It was literally
we've got the army here, but it's not a problem. They're just, we bring them in all the time on everything. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, and it was very much, they said, oh no, we're not going to do that.
And also because of the petrol fuel shortages and the food shortages and the warnings about Christmas and stuff, the government have said this week at their conference and stuff, the Conservative conference, talking about all that stuff. And there's literally videos. I mean, you can go and find videos of all the politicians in Boris's cabinet talking about during the Leave campaign and saying it was never going to happen. All this Project Fear stuff was absolute rubbish. And now they're telling us genuinely this is their stance. It's actually happening. Not just, I mean, it is happening. We can see that. But this is what they're saying now. They're saying, well, yeah, it was always the plan that was going to happen. And you're like, well, apart from when you said it absolutely fucking wasn't going to happen.
Plan, yeah. It was impossible any of these things would happen.
Is there anything on your...
No, I'm pretty happy to end it there. I think we've had a good chat. We pretty much covered 98% of what I wanted to talk about anyway. So
we'll go for the 2%. Let's get for a full rounded 100%.
No, to be honest...
Yes, the rash has cleared up. Thank you for asking.
The only thing I was going to ask you is, how do you feel about your future in this country?
Bleaker and bleaker. I get closer and closer to emigrating every day.
That's fair.
I feel like there's less and less, and I've always said, I mean, I might go before then, I might not, but I might go before then. I've always said, if they do, there's a certain point of privatisation of the NHS. As someone who has a kind of chronic, I do have a chronic illness, that's why I suffer so much, and I just wish you guys would just send me some love and some positivity.
We have a Patreon page and a Just Giving page.
But if there comes a point where that and I have to stop paying for those medications, it's like, yeah, I'm outie.
Yeah,
this country doesn't represent me at all. I completely understand that. I think. What about you?
Pessimistic, as I said, me and my partner have had to have a conversation.
And it's bleak. They're bleak conversations.
Well, we've had to face the reality. There's a chance we might not be able to afford to have children.
Yeah.
And that was a really sobering thought.
Or if you do, you're going to have to become part of the benefit state.
Yeah.
And fraudulent because you will be together and you'll be having to be claiming not to be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's the world we live in, and I think there's no better way to end it on. That I know, sorry to make it a bleak note to end it on.
I will say this, though. If you're feeling quite bleak and you want to tell us how miserable you are and how miserable we made you, you can do that by reaching out to us at Swords Crossing on Twitter.
You can.
Use the hashtag bleak as fuck. Let us know.
Yeah, so on Twitter at Swords Crossing, Facebook Crossing Swords, Instagram Crossing Swords _podcast.
Comment on our videos on YouTube.
Yes, and you can find us on YouTube by searching Crossing Swords and the name of the episode. And you can contact us via email at crossingswords19@gmail.com.
Just tell us how miserable we made you and how you were having a really good day and we just brought you down for like an hour or so.
But please don't stop listening, guys. Don't get that.
No, come back. We'll be happy next week. I promise you'll be happy next week.
We always do a silly episode after we've done the serious ones. We'll have to think of something funny to do in the next week.
We'll get if you guys all send us like dick pics, we'll rate them next week.
Absolutely.
I would as well. I would as well.
I would. Oh mate, I really hope we don't get any.
I swear to God, if there's just a flurry of penises.
And on that bombshell, we'll see you next time.
Bye.